Okay, I think the room has nicely filled up. We have more than 50 people who joined, and so I have the pleasure to welcome you to the first session of the dialogue series, Talking Interoperability. My name is Ralf Rademacher. I work for GIZ and have the pleasure to help set the scene for this dialogue series today. The dialogue series here is organized by the Digital Convergence Initiative to facilitate in-depth technical conversations around standard-based interoperability in the social protection sector. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll break that down what it means in more detail as we move along. In each session, we zoom into one specific country example, and today it is the example of India's Karnataka State and its Kutumba system. Let's briefly look at the session's flow, which you already see on your screen. We'll have a short welcome and introduction to today's session. Thereafter, we go into a more detailed presentation of the Kutumba system, followed by a discussion. The discussion will be a panel discussion, which we then open to questions from the audience, so that you are involved in that discussion as well, because we are really interested to exchange. It's a dialogue series and not a webinar where we broadcast, but something where we intend to engage with everybody in the room here. We'll try to wrap that up at the end with some closing remarks and bring all of that together. We have 2 hours set aside, so we hope this is sufficient to really dig deep into the topic. Let's look at some housekeeping rules so that we have a smooth flow of this session. So first, maybe to start with the last point on this screen, this session is being recorded. We want to preserve that the example and the good discussion which would take place and make it available. So I hope you can agree to it being recorded. If you have reservations, so either stay mute or you would need to leave, please. But I hope you can agree to that recording. Apart from that, kindly switch your camera on when talking. If your bandwidth doesn't allow, don't worry, simply do it without camera, but if so, it's nicer to see the people who are talking. When you're not speaking, kindly mute yourself. And if you have any questions or want to make a contribution, kindly raise your virtual hand or type into the chat that you would like to essentially make a contribution. We'll call upon you so that this is nicely organized, but as I said, we'll mainly look at Q&As in the latter part of the conversation here. So before we kick off, let me briefly provide you with some more background on the Digital Convergence Initiative and this dialogue series here. The Digital Convergence Initiative is housed under the partnership Universal Social Protection, or in short USP 2030, but it is explicitly open to USP 2030 members and non-members. So we are really trying to reach out to every social protection and digital and technical expert in order to create a real broad initiative where we bring together expertise from as many as possible. So I'm very glad that many of you have joined here. The Digital Convergence Initiative aims to develop standards in order to help create a harmonized and interoperable digital ecosystem for social protection. We have seen that we have in recent years, a lot of development of digital systems in various countries, and everybody is, trying to build their own system, which is trying to be made coherent and connected and increasingly, interoperable within the country. But we think that they can be convergence also to standards, which are, allowing interoperability more easily, and these standards can be anchored as a convergence at a global level. So standards for interoperability help to essentially give room for innovation so that ICT solution providers can build products which are interoperable, which are easy to use, which are easy to integrate, and which is easy to maintain and scale. And such standards do reduce the time and costs of developing solutions at a country level, because you can essentially define more clearly what you need and have a building block, which really fits into other building blocks also. So which enable programs and countries also to mix and match components from different suppliers and replace also components which are essentially aging and which are no longer up to the mark. And so with that, it helps ensure that systems are future-proof by design, regardless where the system currently stands. When future development intenders essentially adhere to these standards, we can more easily pick up the latest developments also from other places, and really have a very solid backbone for our social protection systems. So this dialogue series here is meant to be a monthly dialogue series, and it is intended to help facilitate in-depth technical conversations. And we want to have these conversations around integrated and interoperable social protection information systems, and look at various countries who really present where they are today, how they arrived there, and maybe where they still also feel they need to move towards to. So it's a kind of a it's not a show and tell in that sense, but it's really a kind of technical reflections, digging deep into the path, which different countries have taken. So we're very grateful to our presenters from the countries to share their experience with us, and grateful today to the colleagues from the state of Karnataka to really be the ones, the first ones, to take us through their system. So we'll deep dive into one country level system, share the nitty-gritty of the technical aspects and how the agencies and various government ministries designed the system and set it up for the interoperability which they've achieved so far. But we'll also look at and how they tackled several of the major challenges on the way, but also see where there are remaining bottlenecks and see what might be next steps to be taken there. And maybe there is some interesting thoughts which can be derived also for the colleagues from this dialogue here, and which we can derive and take back to the countries where we all work in. So let's look at the session and the colleagues whom we have on the panel today. So we'll have two presenters, which, Domi, can you move to the next slide, please? Which will be walking us through the Kutumba system. On the one hand, we have Rajiv Chawla, and on the other hand, Annapurna K, and I'll give you a more detailed background of everybody in a second. They will present us the Kutumba system, and we'll have two colleagues, Raul Rujiafrik and Rodrigo Assumpção, as the discussants in that session, who will share first reflections. The entire session will be tied together and by the facilitation of my colleague Anita Mittal, who will walk us through or maneuver through the entire session. Now let's look at a more detailed introduction per colleague. So Rajiv Chawla, Domi, yeah, thanks, has recently retired from the civil service as additional chief secretary of the government of Karnataka, India, where he led the Kutumba project. So Rajiv has a strong passion for technology-enabled governance and has combined his administrative skills and technology passion to push significant progress in e-governance over the past 30 years. For instance, he initiated the digitization of the land record systems in Karnataka, and with that laid the foundations for the Bhumi project, for which he was awarded the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Civil Services in 2007. He is joined by Annapurna K, who is a civil service servant with a decade of experience working in various departments of the government of Karnataka. And for the past 2 years, she serves as a project director of the Kutumba project at the Center for E-Governance. Prior to joining civil services, Annapurna served in the Indian Army for 5 years. So, and as said, as discussants, we're happy to welcome today Rahul Rojafrik. He is the director of the Social Security Development Branch at the International Social Security Association, ISA. So the branch is responsible for the ISA knowledge output, the analysis and data collection. And before joining ISA in 2009, Rahul worked in the Social Security Institution of Uruguay as an IT manager. The other discussant is Rodrigo Assumpção. He is a social protection MIS specialist in the International Labour Organization, and he focuses on the implementation of digital transformation projects in social protection. He was a consultant before joining ILO for ISA, the ILO, and the World Bank, and was the CEO of DataPrev, which is the Social Security Information and Technology Enterprise of Brazil. He's a member of the steering committee of this Digital Convergence Initiative. And as a facilitator of today's discussion, I'm happy to welcome my colleague Anita Mittal. She is a senior advisor at GIZ and leads the Digital Convergence Initiative. She has extensive experience in the design and implementation of identification systems for client countries of the World Bank and e-governance applications in India. Earlier in her career, she has led the e-governance interoperability and standards project for the National e-governance division in the Ministry of ICT of the Government of India. So, and without any further ado, and after this round of introductions, I'd like to hand over to Anita to walk us through the discussion today. Thank you. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Ralph. So India is a country of 1.3 billion people, and it's a federal country with 28 states and 8 union territories, but some of the states are bigger than quite a few countries, exceeding 50 million to 100 million population. Over the last decade, India has been a frontrunner in enhancing public service delivery through digital technology. We have all heard about Aadhaar, the unique ID project of India, and Unified Payment Interface, which enable direct benefit transfer to the beneficiaries. And this has impacted millions of beneficiaries and saved billions of dollars. At the same time, the pandemic has revealed that though we have so many systems and data, due to lack of interoperability, efforts to support the families during the pandemic were less optimal. We did not have the data we needed to make decisions. We are now seeing a second generation of reforms in many Indian states to develop integrated social information systems to address these challenges while taking advantage of the national systems. Today, we have a presentation from Karnataka, which is the southern Indian state, to present their system called Kutumba. We have Mr. Rajiv Chawla and Ms. Annapurna to enlighten us on their interoperable system. And without further ado, I invite Annapurna to start the session. Over to you, Annapurna.
Thank you, Anita. It is my pleasure to be part of this dialogue series and an honor to present the Kutumba project in this webinar. Next slide, please. Karnataka is one of the 4 states located in southern India with a population of about 61.1 million, which converts to around 13.5 million households. This is as per 2011 census, and the projected population for 2021 is about 68 million. Of this 61.1 million population, about 13.2% are multidimensionally poor. Karnataka is also one of the top 5 states in India, and amongst these 5 states, it has the highest per capita gross state domestic product, which is about 0.305 million. It is also a major job producer, creating about 10% of the formal jobs in the country and contributing 8.8% to the national gross domestic product. In terms of SDG goals, India stands third as per the Niti Aayog's SDG India Index report. Karnataka is also a pioneer state in e-governance. It is the only state in India to have established a separate department of e-governance way back in 2003. Almost all citizen services and benefits today are delivered electronically, and citizen service centers are made available at the village level, which is the lowest level of administration, so that citizens have access to online services. Next slide, please. With the Bangalore being the Silicon Valley of India, Karnataka is also blessed to have a large landscape of information system. Several common digital infrastructure facilities are available at the national level, the Aadhaar or the SCCC, which is a survey-based deprivation data. Within the state, we have Fruits, which is the farmer registry, which runs on Bhumi, that is the land in digitized land record system. Several other systems like DBT portal for payments, procurement portal, scholarship portal, disability registry, civilian birth registry, etc. are available. Next slide, please. Karnataka implements more than 1,800 plus welfare schemes and programs through its 41 departments. There are large scale social protection programs with the public distribution system, which gives PDS and also subsidized food transfer, which covers about 15 million households, that is about 55 million individuals in the state. Other key programs are like health insurance, that is the Ayushman Bharat Arogya Karnataka, which covers currently as on date about 10 million individuals. Social security pension to vulnerable groups, particularly senior citizens, specially able, widows, destitutes, covers about 7.3 million individuals. Karnataka focuses a lot on the education sector. It has several scholarship programs, pre-metric and post-metric, that is before class 10th and after class 10th, which is given to about 3.5 million students. This financial year, Karnataka implemented CM Raita Vidya Nidhi scheme, which is a flagship program of the government, where students who belong to farmer families were encouraged to pursue their education by transferring scholarships without them having to apply, that is on entitlement basis, and nearly 4.5 million students benefited out of this program. Housing is also a focus sector in Karnataka, so it is both the urban and rural housing is covered under these schemes, and it covers about 0.2 million households. Next slide, please. Sir, I request you to take up now.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Why did we start Kutumba? What was the motivation for us to do? And we realized that there is a high barrier for poor. In fact, poor were those who were not able to apply and get the digital benefits also. They were actually getting deprived. They were out of the system. Huge rent seeking because there was a discretion of in the favor of the administrators. And the poor were also not aware of what benefits they have to get. So number one, they don't know how to apply. Number two, they don't even know that they have to apply because they don't know what are the schemes meant for them. Government systems are also not capable of handling poor facing sudden shocks, COVID, for example. Why can't I give money automatically to each family where a COVID patient died? Why do I have to collect applications? So this was the motivation, next slide, with which we started about 4 years back on a project called Kutumba. Now, Kutumba means family, and in Kannada and in Hindi, Kutumba means family. Now, thankfully, Aadhaar is restricted. You cannot use it for most of the purposes, but a new section of the law, Aadhaar law, called 44B2 allows us to use Aadhaar for creating these systems. And we all would appreciate that a unique ID like Aadhaar would be the backbone for Kutumba system, for deduplication, for identification, and for everything. Now, what we have done is that these were the objectives. As you can see, the objective is not to maximize revenue of the government. The objective is poor should get help, leakages to be removed, the famous principle of ask data only once, and entitlement-based system. These were the objectives with which Kutumba started. Next slide, please. This is the way Kutumba has evolved. In 2018-19, it was announced. A proof of concept was carried out. And then, of course, we created a centralized data repository by connecting to 18 databases. And as we move forward, we would explain. I'm delighted to tell that there was no survey for creating this database. We used the existing government databases and then, of course, created these systems, the interoperability, the data consistency, all those issues would be explained. Then, of course, in 21-22, we said that we should graduate from a family database to a social protection system. And we brought in 5 components which would be explained. Now, as on date, the idea is that the government has decided that this database would not just be used for citizens to submit their application, for facilitating them to submit applications. We will move forward and deliver services on a suo motu basis. Why should we ask even a citizen to apply? Which child would say that he doesn't want scholarship? Every child would want scholarship, and therefore there's no need to take scholarship, to take application from anybody. Next slide, please. Now, these are the components which Anpurna will explain after a little time. We have the social registry, brilliant registry, automatically updated, largely dynamic. We have a beneficiary registry, which talks about those citizens out of Kutumba or those families out of Kutumba who have got benefits and what all benefits they have got. It helps us because this lets us know whether anybody usurping the benefits of the government. Suvidha is another platform which helps you to discover schemes done by a brilliant startup in the country. We took their help and then, of course, put this in place. And we have a payment portal where we take the Aadhaar ID itself as the financial address. And then, of course, the grievance redressal, because you will always have problems when people in a social registry, if people are excluded, they're also excluded from all the benefits. Next slide, please. Talking about a little more about registry, these are the individual attributes which are there. Some of you may not be able to appreciate some of them, but these are contextually relevant in any Indian state, not just in Karnataka. All these parameters are, of course, very common as far as individual attributes are concerned. But the 2 attributes in the family attribute, and the first one is caste of the family. Now, caste system still survives in this country, and therefore, depending upon what caste you have, some of you may not be aware of the caste nuances, but the caste is a very, very important. And then, of course, how much of income you have, land which you own, where do you live, your GPS coordinates, your deprivation indexes, and so on, including your disability, etc. Now, the most exciting thing is that none of these have been surveyed. These are all collected from validated databases of the government. We have data for about 80% of the citizens, and these are those who actually, those who are poor, who come in contact with the government. 20% of the poor, or 20% of the people who are not covered are actually affluent people, and the objective is how do we bring them in without coercing, without forcing them to kind of join the Kutumba system. Of course, there is a process through which you can self-enroll, and Poona will explain. You can also come in the assisted mode. Out of 33,000 villages in Karnataka, 29,000 villages have either broadband or 3G connectivity in Karnataka, and therefore you don't really have a problem of internet in the villages. Next slide, please. The data from the public distribution system became a starting point for us. Citizens take food grains every month. In fact, in one of the biggest provincial elections called Uttar Pradesh, one of the winning reason was a good amount of good quantity of free food grains given to the citizen there very effectively. Same is the case with Karnataka. We had a very good public distribution system where family is a unit and individual are the members. And we picked up that database, which was completely national ID seeded. There was a complete deduplication, eKYC was available. And then, of course, we added these parameters, which you can see. None of these parameters are picked up from the field. They have come from the databases, which are dynamic and getting updated automatically. Next slide, please. This is the way the golden record, the way they call this, the golden record looks like. You have location details, you have personal details of that person, the photograph. Most of them, some of this data comes from the Aadhaar system with the consent of the citizen. Next point. Next slide, please. And of course, these are the family details. So the income is of a family. The caste is of a family. And then, of course, some more details about this family. So this is what we call as the golden record. Next slide, please, of the family. And Poona, I'll request you to take it from here.
Sure, sir. The second component of Kutumba ecosystem is the Beneficiary Registry. This Beneficiary Registry is critical for the social protection system because it is required to identify families who have not received benefits and also to exclude the families who have already received benefits. So it contains details of social protection benefits which has been extended to individual and families. And it is an integrated beneficiary registry because it integrates the data of a person, the benefits received by a person or a family across social programs and schemes. Some of the key welfare benefits that are captured in this registry is whether the person has got a housing benefit, what are the benefits received under agriculture department schemes, whether a person is working under NREGA, that is the employment guarantee scheme, the COVID financial relief that was dispersed, whether a person is a laborer and is getting any labor related scheme benefits, etc. This beneficiary registry data is also proposed to be used for data analytics, particularly from the perspective of the impact of welfare schemes. So has there been an improvement in socioeconomic status, whether the welfare measures have really reflected onto the ground, and also to track a family which moves out of deprivation parameters so that progress can be monitored. Income and poverty trends can also be assessed, and this going forward would also help us in assessing the performance of a family across various sectors like agriculture sector or education sectors and so on. Next slide, please. This is a sample representation of how a beneficiary registry data looks like. We have the department name and the scheme name given to a beneficiary and the year of payment that person has received this particular benefit. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The third component of a social protection system or an integrated social information system is to have an integrated beneficiary management system. Had a provision of either developing one of its own or utilizing the existing one. So Suvidha is one of the subcomponents of Kutumba. It is a completely digitized, automated beneficiary system which allows a citizen to do his scheme discovery, do an eligibility check, and also apply for the schemes. It runs on Kutumba database and provides an interface for citizens to apply for schemes or programs. The data from social registry is utilized to check the eligibility of the citizen and also identify the entitlement as to which schemes the particular citizen or a family is eligible for. The advantage of running on Kutumba's social registry is the need for submission of document as proof is removed, and only for those data which is not available in social registry, the information needs to be submitted by citizen. While social registry covers most of the information that are required for determining the eligibility for scheme, it does not capture all these details that offer citizen. That is because there is a data minimization and purpose limitation concept applied on Kutumba social registry. So we minimize the data, and those additional data which is submitted by the citizen is then diverted by Suvidha to the concerned data owner department. So generally the mechanism is the citizen applies with the proof of document and the department calling for this application verifies and approves. But Suvidha goes a step further. It sends the data to the owner department who verifies and confirms, yes, this is the correct data. And this data flows back into the social registry for updation against the citizen so that the philosophy of ask only once can be implemented. Next slide, please. This is a screen representation of how Suvidha works. When a citizen logs into Suvidha, his parameters are captured and from Kutumba data, Kutumba's social registry, and the schemes for which the person is eligible for is indicated to the citizen sector-wise, so the citizen can apply to the concerned sector. One must remember in the prior to Suvidha, a citizen had to go to each department website and check whether he was eligible for a particular scheme or not. He had to go and to log into different applications to apply. So if he was found eligible for 4 schemes in 4 different departments, so he had to visit 4 departments for this purpose. But Suvidha has removed the need for that, and now within one IT system itself, he is able to check his eligibility and also apply. Next screen, please. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Payment?
Thank you. The fourth component is payment platform. For a social protection system to be effective, it is essential that citizens are the payments or benefits are delivered to the citizens to the known financial address. There are 2 ways to go about it. One, you capture the payment, the financial address of the citizen from him, that is account number, bank details, etc. Other one is to utilize Aadhaar as a financial address. The state, Karnataka State has a state direct benefit transfer portal. transfer portal, which is the payment platform which runs purely on Aadhaar and allows for Aadhaar-enabled payment. So it is integrated with the National Payment Corporation of India system, Khajane, which is the Karnataka's IFMS, and as well as the PFMS of Government of India. So Kutumba supports the departments in delivering the benefits through Aadhaar by connecting to the payment platform. Next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yeah, the fifth one, grievance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. The fifth component is to have a grievance redressal system where a citizen who has grievance regarding incompleteness of data or incorrect data or needs to have a mechanism to notify about failures in delivery, he needs to have a recourse to grievance redressal. Karnataka has an integrated public grievance redressal system, which is a centralized platform with online and call center features. So all departments in the state of Karnataka are onboarded on this, and Kutumba has also been onboarded on this existing PGRS for grievance redressal related to any aspects of Kutumba. Next slide, please.
You can go ahead, technical overview.
Okay. All right. Coming to the technical overview of Kutumba, Kutumba has a 5-layered architecture with the data layer at the bottom and an integration services which interacts with data layer, and also both the systems interact with the external systems through an enterprise service bus. The third layer in our Kutumba architecture is the application layer, which is then followed by the presentation layer and touch points being this common citizen service centers, Karnataka 1, Bangalore 1, which are electronic delivery of citizen services, as well as self-service mode and assisted service mode. Kutumba database is of approximately 70 GB, and the technology stack used is .NET and HTML for the UI. The backend is mainly C# and web server, and RDBMS is the data that is used. Next slide, please. Sir, I hand it over to you.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So before I just wanted to add one more point, which you see that when she spoke about the DBT platform, I think I should make it clear as to how do you actually consolidate all the benefits which are gotten by a family. Now, Aadhaar is not just identity mechanism. It's also a financial address. The NPCI has a mapper, the National Payment Corporation of India, maintains a mapper where if you fire a payment on the ID of the person, the NPCI mapper then translates that ID into the bank account number into which the ID is seeded, and then routes that transaction to that bank. As far as we are concerned, we of course only understand in which ID it is given, and therefore we maintain all the benefits against that ID into the beneficiary registry. So more than Kutumba, I think Aadhaar has greatly helped us to consolidate the benefits imagine if you had a bank account number, the citizen can keep on changing a bank account number, and then you have a difficulty in understanding which all payments have gone to a single person. Coming back to now we are talking about interoperability, and I am talking about the domain part, while Anpurna will continue to talk on the technical part. Now, integrations with the databases of the other department, or call them IT systems, is the backbone of Kutumba. You push data, you pull data. So what do you pull? You pull the attributes, those Kutumba data points which are maintained by that department. For example, the registry on the civil registry, birth and death system. We pull the data from there on the birth and the death. And then, of course, once we pull, we have an updated golden record. We then push it to all those departments who require updated record. If there's a death, we come to know because we pull the civil registry. We come to know who is dead. And then, of course, we push it to the social benefit registry, social pensions, where an old age pensioner has to be removed because he is dead. So the near real-time integration, of course, we do it in a batch mode every night, and we pick up attribute, means the data points which are part of the golden record and which have to come from the other departments. The data owning department, the owner of the field. We, of course, allow departments to periodically verify the eligibility. While we push data on a daily basis, these departments, we help them on a batch mode also, whatever way they are comfortable. One has to understand that the technical competence of organizations will increase slowly, and therefore sometimes batch modes will also be very useful. So we are able to, of course, it brings efficiency. On one side, citizen life becomes easy, but on the other side, efficiency into the expenditure comes. You are able to remove ineligible beneficiaries, and you are able to give benefits to those who are not included. The departments are able to remove deceased beneficiaries, which is very natural. You are giving them the updated data, they can apply those conditions, remove people. And of course, one department who is the owner of the data keeps on giving us the updated value of the data on a daily basis. Next slide, please. Next slide. It was not very easy. People were cynical. And I must tell you that the success of Kutumba has, in a way, excited the union government. The Prime Minister's office constituted a committee recently to find out how to replicate Kutumba across the nation. When I say Kutumba, Kutumba type of a system. Kutumba is only a generic name, a social protection system. And the committee report has been given. It is under the consideration of the Prime Minister. And thankfully, and the least Kutumba has done is to ignite the debate on the need of a social protection system, and if not, at least a social registry. Now, we had lots of issues. The identity information was not available in many of the databases. What did we do? We first administrative clearances for putting that ID information, and here, thankfully, the Aadhaar work, which was done 10 years back, is very handy. We had to get the permission from Government of India under what is called 44B2, and we were able to seed our civil registry with Aadhaar. That's a big thing. That's a real big thing. Because everybody we know who is dying in which family, who is taking birth in which family. That's a tremendous achievement. And I salute to Anpurna and team for achieving this civil registry connectivity with Kutumba through the national ID. And of course, these utilities, we give free irrigation pump sets. We give very subsidized power to ESCOMs, electricity companies. They don't have Aadhaar. Even today, they don't have Aadhaar. And similarly, this road transport vehicles, they also don't have Aadhaar. So we are kind of working with them. We had the problems. So you don't really have ID. I mean, while the national government, there is a system for ID, but that ID has to get into the system. There are many countries who don't even have a national ID. We are lucky. Are we really exploiting our luckiness? And the answer is partially yes. So we need to feed that ID into the system. Inconsistency in database, and of course, it's a natural thing to happen. We have defined the sources, primary source. There are ways which I think Anpurna will talk as to how she has handled this. We had problems on all other things, date of birth, name, ID. When you put an ID into a system, there has to be a mechanism for authenticating. You just can't put anybody's else ID. Thankfully, Aadhaar gives you a mechanism where you can actually find out. And I'll be happy to answer as to how we did, because there are certain nuances in this. How do you find out whether the right ID is seeded? If it was not seeded on day 0 and you are doing what is called inorganic seeding, how do you know you are putting a right ID? That you're not putting the ID of A against the beneficiary B. There are mechanisms which I'm sure if required we can speak. Next slide, please. The data quality issues again, incomplete data sets and non-availability of data. So while you have incomplete number of records, even within a record you did not have data. It's a natural thing to happen. But we were able to kind of recover from these problems. I'm sure Anpurna will explain. Invalid data, deduplication issues, and of course non-standard date of birth, etc., which she was successfully able to handle. I'll not waste my time because I know these are standard issues, and she should tell how she handled that. And of course, all these leads to data sharing issues. I mean, you can't take garbage and put into the system, then you lose credibility. And the worst thing which can happen is the credibility problem. Then departments will not use. They will say, no, we don't have any belief on you. Therefore, you have to be extremely careful that the golden record is actually golden, not that it is some iron, etc. It has to be really, really golden record. Next slide, please. Now, the measures, what did we do? So, of course, Anpurna was the project director, I was overall in charge, and she was doing all these things. Now, wherever you did not have identity information, we notified. We said, look, if you can't capture Aadhaar, because after all, the Kutumba ID is a proxy for Aadhaar, and we all know that. After all, there's a national ID, and then you have other IDs. These IDs have to be built onto the top of the Aadhaar, and therefore they are proxy. Either you seed Aadhaar, and if you have legal issues, you seed Kutumba ID. You seed Kutumba, I have Aadhaar. If you seed Aadhaar, I have Kutumba. If you can't seed Aadhaar because of legal problems, although we have that clause called 44B2, where union government gives you permission to seed Aadhaar on a voluntary basis. So we issued government orders saying that these are the systems where Kutumba ID will be seeded at least prospectively, if not in a retrospective manner. And then, of course, Kutumba ID is captured at the time of birth and death registration. So we slowly started improving. We had inconsistency in demographic data. Now we did lots of surveys which were being done. We never did survey, but we gave data for survey to be done. And as part of the survey, we captured some data which came from verified sources. For example, when you do Aadhaar eKYC, you get actually a legal data. We did not go and do EKYC in the field, but when we gave our survey, our data for survey, we got some data back. And we were very excited. I said, I'm not interested in doing survey, but I can always get some byproducts out of survey which are being done by the other departments. Now, you had contradictions of data across departments, and therefore she defined what is called confidence level or the primary source. So she defined for every data who is the primary source. And I did not care for any data from any other source. But suppose there was no primary source, that means there was a lack of definition as to who owns this data. There are, for example, marital status. We really don't know whom to look at. And therefore we said, fine, we will then go by consistency of that field across the databases. If we find that the large number of databases are talking about one field value in one particular way for a particular person, then we presume it to be correct. In any case, Kutumba allows this data to be seen by citizens, and they can always comment, which she will talk about. They can go to the website and comment. I know it's difficult for them. They are not learned enough, but then I'm sure as the time passes, the way Aadhaar has become popular, it's just a matter of time that Kutumba will become popular. Next slide, please. I'm not able to see the next slide, 27th slide. And yeah, this is my last slide, and I'll request Anpurna to take after this. The data quality issues were there. Data profiling of each database was done. We sat with those people. The fact that I happened to get enough time to work in e-governance area, that perhaps gave a little credibility. People could understand that we are bringing value. So they were all willing. So I think credibility also goes a long way. And people understand that you are doing something serious, you have done reasonably good work in the past, then of course they flow with you. So we sat with all these people. We taught them. We enabled them. We did not just do bossism on them. And then of course the data quality issues were, of course, it's a continuous process, but almost all the departments were taught, were cajoled, were forced to look at their data. And then of course, impact on data sharing. Now, departments were requested to address the quality issues. We also use what is called transitive relations. If you did not have, let's say a record A was connected, A and B were connected through one field, and B and C were connected through another common field. We did this transitive thing and found how A and C records were connected. We don't have a common field between A, B, and B, C, but A and B have some field, whereas B and C have some other field. So we did that also, of course. She was also responsible for issuing a data governance program. Various committees were constituted. And that went a long way in letting people understand the seriousness around the data quality. And Puna, I'll request you to take from here.
Thank you, sir. Next slide, please. So the issues and the challenges faced during this data integration led to the realization there needs to be a formal data governance structure. So Karnataka today has a formal data governance structure, which is a three-tiered committees, with the Data Governance Steering Committee, a policy-making body at the apex, followed by an executive committee and a data governance working group. The working group is critical because it is an operational committee at the level of the department, which comprises of data stewards, data custodians, and other members. So they are the actual implementing agency in this data governance structure. Next slide, please. So the data governance committee and working group is shown in this slide. I will not go into detail. This slide shall be shared, which can be referred to. Next slide, please. Coming to data management in Kutumba, the issues and challenges faced also led to the realization we cannot consume the data as available, but it needs to undergo data management process, and accordingly a data management structure was created and process was adopted. So on the left hand side you see the various department databases. So when the data is received in Kutumba, they undergo some pre-processing and control checks, and audit is maintained of these checks. Once this during this pre-processing, validations are also carried out, and the data is then moved into the standardization layer where the DQ rules, that is data quality rules from the data repository, are then applied. Once the records pass through this data quality and standardization layer, they follow the match and merge process, that is the master data management process. And then once the match occurs, the records are merged into golden records. We apply the trust and survivorship rules at this place. Once a golden record is updated, this data is then shared with various departments through the API gateways. The records, the archival policies are also defined for Kutumba records, which are then followed as defined. Next slide, please. So the data standards adopted in Kutumba is we have a data dictionary, which is automatically updated. So this data dictionary is also defined for both contributing and consuming departments. When we say contributing, these are the departments which are the source or the owners of the data. For example, caste and income data, birth and death registry. Consuming departments are mainly those departments which consume Kutumba data for implementing their schemes. So whenever the data dictionary is defined for contributing departments or consuming departments, it is based on the minimal data requirement, and during the initial onboarding process, we share the metadata with each department. So when department raises its request, this is placed before the data governance working group for its approval, and once approved for sharing, this data is then shared with the system by creating a client code. So each department, only the specific data is shared. There are regular reviews by security, audit, and governance committees to ensure standards are maintained and updated on regular basis. Next slide, please. Interoperability interfaces are mainly three in Kutumba. We have an offline ETL process which connects systems to share the data. The departments share the data in a specified location, and the process is run on this to read the data and then process. We have an online interface mechanism where connecting systems are directly integrated through API, that is both forward and reverse integration, and we use this API mode for sharing data. The third mode is batch mode, that is a asynchronous request and response method we have currently used for this education data. It must be kept in mind, like I said earlier also, social registry maintains the minimal data which is required for the departments to determine the eligibility. So a cron's job is used to fetch data when a particular department asks for data which is not currently available in Kutumba, but is required by the department for a specific purpose which is legitimate. So this cron job mode is used to get such data. Can you please click on that hyperlink, online interfaces? So next slide, please.
One second.
We can continue, maybe probably in the end, if the time permits, we'll go. So coming to the data exchange protocols, Kutumba has defined a data management manual which specifies what should be the data integrity and confidentiality. Integrity is ensured by check digit method, while confidentiality is ensured by encryption method. We use different approaches, web services, which could be generic or point-to-point. We also are working on onboarding onto the enterprise service bus. And also the fourth mechanism is the broadcast mechanism. Particularly, we use this for sharing the disease data to all the departments which are connected with us. Access control protocol for data exchange is ensured through a centralized API, and each department has a client code, so there is a department specific data share. Requesting department is also given a unique security key and client code for data exchange. Next slide, please. Data security and data privacy are two critical components which Kutumba recognizes are very important. So data security, we follow periodic security testing, the hosting of data in militarized zone in data center, which is ISO 27001 certified. Activities are monitored under Kutumba databases are monitored under Security Operations Center as well as through database activity monitoring tool. Industry best practices like HSM, key secure vault for encryption have been adopted, and APIs are enabled with payload encryption and hash checks. Kutumba ensures encryption of data both during rest as well as transit. Data privacy is an important aspect, keeping in mind the Personal Data Protection Bill, which is under deliberation. So Kutumba has adopted the 7 principles of privacy by design. It has implemented the principles of purpose specification, data minimization, collecting data only what is required, and retention policy has been defined. So the design and architecture are aligned to the rights of data principle, which are envisaged in the PDP bill. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, sir, would you take this up, sir?
I would do that.
Sir.
Now, this is the output. Whatever she spoke was the input, and she is good in that. I only use the system. Now, citizens are, of course, excited. You heard about Suvidha, which I told you has been done by collaborating with a good startup in India. And that Suvidha uses the data of the citizens in Kutumba to give exciting outputs. It tells you, just give your Kutumba ID. It tells you which are the schemes you are eligible, and click on one of the scheme, and then of course you can apply. When you apply, we don't really ask any data. There's no reason for asking data. We already have your data, and therefore citizen experience is greatly wonderful. They know that they have to just give their ID. In many of the schemes, the documentation submission is reduced to 0. I'm sure Annapurna will show one of the project, one of the scheme there. The Kutumba also enables single sign-on. That means that you don't, the Karnataka has a single sign-on based on your Aadhaar. That means you register into the single sign-on system once using your Aadhaar and fingerprint authentication, or your iris authentication, or your facial recognition. Once you connect, thereafter we know your identity, and then of course you can connect to any of the system, including Kutumba, using your username password. Depending upon how critical the transaction is, we can again ask you to do Aadhaar authentication by way of your facial or iris or whatever. So that makes life very easy. And of course, citizens can see their data. Now, this is very exciting, the transparency part. You can see what I'm maintaining, and you have a right to curse us, right to shout on us, and to tell us that, look, the data which you are having is wrong. What do I do then? I'm not a owner of the data. I'm only collecting and maintaining this data at a single place. So depending upon which data he has problems, through the integrated PGRS system, and the complaint is then routed to that department who owns the data field, and there, of course, they will take a decision. We can only help them to route it. But the fact is that you can see your data, you can comment on your data, and of course, you can register new families, those 20% families which are not there in the Kutumba database. Next slide. And Purna, kindly explain, Anpurna.
Yes. So this screen shows the citizen view within Kutumba. A citizen can log into Kutumba portal using his single sign-on, and the details of the citizen are displayed. The head of the family or the point of contact can view and edit for all members, and also for the minor children. Adults can view for themselves. Next slide, please. The citizen has access to his personal information, and should there be some edits or updates to be done, provision to edit and update the same using API or uploading certain documents. For example, though we are connected with the civil registry, this is a digitized systems for the last 8 to 10 years. Any date of any birth or death prior to that is not available. So in such cases, they need to upload the document as a proof of date of birth. Next slide, please. The family details like caste and income, and a provision to update using the APIs of the concerned source department is available. Other details like various other identifiers that are connected to the citizen are also shown. Next slide, please. The address information, the provision to update it using getting address from Aadhaar has been given. In addition, we also display the details of benefits that a citizen has received, so they can also look into that and raise concerns if any. Next slide, please. So in addition to this improvement in user experience and access to their own data, it has been found that there's a quick delivery of services to citizens, mainly because the processing time is reduced as the eligibility and entitlement with the verified data is available. Quicker decisions by officials is a resultant of this. Drudgery of government officials to process applications is reduced because no manual verification of documents, and ineligible applications get filtered out, particularly when they come through the Suvidha mode. So there is a reduction in the total number of applications to be processed. There is a responsive and dynamic inclusion into beneficiary schemes. So certain schemes have been identified where citizens do not have to apply. For example, for old age pensions, now government is going ahead with Suomoto identification and delivery. Similarly, the farmer children are being sanctioned scholarships who have been identified to be eligible on Suomoto basis. Next slide, please. This is a representation of the benefits which are for a particular scheme. In this case, it's a pre-matric scholarship, that is children studying between class 1 to 10 or grade 1 to 10 belonging to minority communities. The criteria early specifies that child must be between class 1 to 10, must belong to minorities, have an annual income less than of 1 lakh, that is 0.1 million, and only 2 students in a family can avail this benefit and must achieve a grade of B or above in the previous class. In the earlier mechanism, next click please. In the earlier manual system or the digital system which was available, the citizen had to submit 5 documents as proof of this. And with next click please. Today, when he enters a family ID, there is no requirement of any document to be submitted, but he can just give his Kutumba ID and all the data gets pre-filled. Next slide, please. Due to interoperability using Kutumba, we have seen an increase in coverage of beneficiaries also. Scholarships which have been delivered to students, about 0.5 million farmer children, construction worker children are also being paid. Post-matric scholarship, it was found that 0.9 million eligible students were identified as against 0.47 million students who applied in 2021. Social Security pensions, about 0.67 million were identified eligible for old age pensions and are being covered. Crop loss payments were done to nearly 1 million farmers, particularly this maize, vegetable, fruits and flower growers. This utilized the data in fruits which was fetched from crop survey, and the farmers were given these payments without them having to apply. Next slide, please. Kutumba has also supported government to identify ineligible or deceased beneficiaries. So there is more effective utilization of revenue as the savings in this are then diverted to new additional beneficiaries. Nearly 0.3 million ineligible ration card holders, that is belonging to who had taken ration card holders as priority households, were identified by determining the exclusion criteria like income tax payee, government employees, having annual income of more than 1.20 lakh, etc. Similarly, in social security pensions, about 0.14 million ineligible social security pensioners have been identified. Broadcasting mechanism for sharing the deceased data, nearly 0.55 million deceased beneficiaries have been removed. Mainly about 4.5 million in ration cards and about 0.1 million in social security pensions. Next slide, please. Anita, we are done with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Annapurna and Mr. Chawla, for this enlightening presentation, which is very detailed. I'm totally overwhelmed and very impressed with what has been achieved in this short period of time. But since we are running a little behind schedule, I'll first invite our discussant, Mr. Rahul, to share his thoughts based on his experience of implementing social security systems with his organization ISA. What does he see about this presentation and the system? And if he has any questions or clarifications from the speakers. Over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Mr. Chawla and Annapurna, for this really very, very interesting presentation. And I would like also to thank the organizers, the GIZ team and the Convergence Initiative team, and for this first webinar and presenting a really very, very impressive experience of interoperable social protection system that I think that matches a number of points and objectives and features that we are looking for in this type of system. And of course, it's sometimes this type of initiatives that are in a very large country like India and don't have a very big visibility because they are not national. But if you take a look to the figures and the number of covered persons, it's just impressive. And so I would like to congratulate for the achievement. I would like to highlight some points. I think that it's a really very interesting and the case and example of interoperable system in which we have registries, social and beneficiary registries. We have a payment system. We have also tools for the customers, for the public, in order to find the schemes and to do some eligibility and the matches, and also to manage their data. And as Mr. Chawla was showing us some minutes ago, and all that in a let's say large scale and context, and in collaboration with and connection with other national systems and state systems and for identification and other purposes. So I think it's a very, very interesting case and for the objectives of the Digital Convergence Initiative, and definitely to consider in the different good practices and approaches to highlight and to share with other institutions. I would like to highlight also some of the points previous to my question, and I think that the way that you show, especially the technical aspects and the covering the interconnection parts and through the technical interoperability, the protocols, and also the type of interoperability, I think it's very clear and matches and what we have been discussing in the ISA and other working groups. The other thing that I think it's important that the project highlights is the importance of the data management and data governance, because as the speakers presented very clearly, many of the the complexities in the interoperable systems are not only in the interconnection, but in the data. And I think that the project, the Kutumba project, is clearly identifying this aspect, and the fact that it's in developing a data governance and it's an environment and rules. I think that it shows that they are in a way to address the complexities. So I would like just to make a question. I think that we are a bit and running out of time. I wanted to know a bit more about the application of the interoperability methods and the data exchange protocols that you presented in the slides. So in particular, and how are you applying the different methods and concretely to access and update the registries? Are you using web services? Are you using the enterprise service bus? Are you using APIs? How are you using this method, especially to access and update the registry? So thank you, and back to you, Anita, Messi, Chawla, and Ms. Annapurna.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul, for those remarks and an interesting question on how are the different interoperability mechanisms, technical interoperability mechanisms being used. Annapurna, would you like to address that?
Yes, Anita, thank you. So, like I said, we use mainly the web APIs. We use a mechanism called as forward integration and a reverse integration, where we extensively use it to share the data as well as consume the data. Broadcast is another mechanism where we know that multiple departments require this data to be updated within their system. So broadcast mechanism is also followed, where we share the data to them, where we publish the data, especially the disease data comes to us from eJanma, that is the civil birth and death registry, on a daily basis through the reverse integration process. So this data gets collated, and on weekly basis we publish this data through the broadcast mechanism for them for the departments to consume if applicable to them, and make changes in there or remove the beneficiaries wherever applicable. Are we currently using enterprise service bus? As we are gradually onboarding onto that, we have an enterprise service bus. We are working on that because data APIs of Kutumba contain a lot of personal data. So we need to have an API management layer where we can see that the privacy aspects are also covered when we share this data. So the work is currently on for onboarding the Kutumba APIs on enterprise service bus. I hope this answers your questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Annapurna, and back to you, Anita.
Yeah, thanks.
So Anita, one thing which I wanted to say was that while people like us were aggressive, saying push data, use new technologies, I am happy that the project director Annapurna in this case was cynical. Cynical, rightly so, because the private data of citizens are involved. And therefore, if you are using ESP, are you really going to kind of let the security layer be loosened? And I think it's important that when we use technology, we should understand the implications of using technology. And we found that when we use enterprise service bus, if we don't have control, we means the Kutumba project itself doesn't have control on what is being done. And the enterprise service bus administrator is managing that data. She said, no, I don't want that. Unless you give me a management control in my head, I would not onboard onto ESP. And I think that's a good thing that she did.
That's very interesting to hear. So back to you, Rahul. You will continue.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chawla, and for the clarification. And the other point that maybe I wanted to know is how all the environment that you are developing for data management and data standards is really very comprehensive. And but the challenge is to apply, to make all that applicable and to make others to apply, and especially taking into account the different partners and the different participants in the Kutumba project, and that which you interact, you exchange data. how do you make these data management practices and standards and applicable through all the different departments and systems? So do you provide manuals, for example, for the providers and developers? Do you organize training sessions? How do you make all this data and governance context, let's say, and to be applicable, all these standards to be applicable in this complex environment?
Thanks, Saul. So I think, Mr. Chawla, you would like to address how did you enforce the good standards that you developed to be adopted by the different stakeholders?
I would request Anpurna to answer that. Anpurna, kindly answer.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Like I said, the formal data governance structure in Karnataka helped us. So the policies for adopting the data standards, like Government of India, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has published what is metadata and data standards. So our steering committee has adopted taken a policy decision that the MDDS would be adopted by the IT systems in the state. However, with the condition that all new IT systems which are being developed would adopt MDDS, but it may not be feasible or practical for existing IT systems. So wherever feasible, they would convert to MDDS standards and go forward. Secondly, when Kutumba shares or consumes data, Kutumba follows MDDS. So invariably, when we share data to the connecting departments, we share it as per the standards that are there. So the connecting systems are forced indirectly to follow the same standards because they have to consume and process using our data. The third point is the most interesting is the departments. There was no hesitancy or resistance from the departments. They understood the value of this, mainly because, like Sir said, we had one-to-one interaction with the department, highlighting the data quality issues, the methods to be adopted. So that also helped in departments adopting this process. So do we handhold the department? Yes, whenever we integrate, Kutumba integrates with any department, we have at least 2 to 3 interactions where we understand their process, suggest them mechanisms, how to incorporate Kutumba data, how to bring about changes in their system, how to adopt the standards, and any technical support required for them to change over is provided by Kutumba system.
Thanks, Saul. Thanks, Annapurna.
Thank you.
It's good to hear that you adopted MDDS standard, because that way I get a finger in the Kutumba project, because it was during when I was working with the Ministry of ICT that we published the MDDS standards. I was involved in that activity. So now I'll invite Rodrigo to share his reflections based on his experience with ILO and engage in a dialogue with our presenters today. Over to you, Rodrigo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anita, and thank you, Mr. Chawla, Madam Annapurna. It was very impressive, as said. I consider myself very fortunate that during my career I have been able to follow since 2004 the immense efforts and even greater achievements that India has managed in the whole e-government space. And one of the things that always struck me, first coming from Brazil, also a big country with a large population, was the lesson in humility. Because we as Brazilians, we would talk about our large numbers, and then we would go into a meeting with India and they would just laugh, rightly so, because the numbers in India are astronomical and extremely impressive. So one of the things that struck me was the deep understanding that when you start making and building the building blocks of a data infrastructure, and you keep and you persist that, you persevere in this, you actually enable different things and dozens of different initiatives. And it was very interesting for me to see how, as Mr. Chawla said, the impressive results of ARDAR are now being used by the states to further their own agenda, to progress their own infrastructure, and these building blocks build upon one another, resulting in more impressive achievements, resulting in the capacity to really decide on public policy and then execute. Because it's very often that we see impressive and important discussions on public policy that are not able to advance into concrete implementation exactly because of the lack of capacity. And this building of this capacity, structuring this ability to define, allocate, find the citizens you have decided to reach is something that is even, I would say, more important than the decisions itself, because they will enable you to apply these decisions. And the decisions you can reorganize, you can refocalize, you can reorient. But if you do not have this infrastructure, especially the data infrastructure, you will not be able to apply these decisions. So it was very interesting to see how this happened. From the experiences that Anita mentioned, both within the ILO and in my previous works with especially the Brazilian government, I was always struck that much more the obstacles around governance and the obstacles around the political disputes and infighting amongst departments can be much stronger and much more difficult to overcome than the technological aspects. I do understand that you mentioned the previous governance structure that so helped you, but I would like to hear a bit more about how these conflicts were negotiated, arbitrated, not only with other departments, but also with the public servants, who sometimes initially perceive themselves as losing power when all this information and all these decisions are, in a sense, dislocated towards the data that is present in the systems. That's what I've seen in some other experiences, and I would like to know if that was also the case with your state. Thank you very much again for the presentation.
Thanks, Rodrigo. So I think we have two civil servants, Mr. Chawla or Annapurna, who would like to take this?
I would answer this. Yes, everybody has their umpire. And that's the human nature. You can't really talk about Brazil or India. That's the human nature. And of course, you have to cajole, carrot, stick. All policies have to be applied. Now, the first thing, as far as the departmental users who were to use this data, we had told them very clearly that in case you are not interested in using this data, don't use it. It is for you to, we have to help you. We did not talk about suo motu delivery of services in the beginning because that takes away your discretion. We only told that your drudgery goes down. That instead of verifying documents, we give you verified data. At the end of the day, you decide what you have to do. And of course, you have to slowly cajole them. My experience of handling Bhumi, I knew how to handle those 10,000 village officials. When we computerize land records, you may like to read that this case history. This experience of how to handle human beings. Now, this had nothing to do with technology. So we told them, you continue what you're doing. We are only giving you data. You don't want to use, don't use. And we actually never pushed that. We said, look, here is the data. And then, of course, the second problem was, how do you get data? Now, when you get data, this was more of a policy problem. That how do you get data? So you have to perhaps only talk to the head of the department. After it's a policy decision, it doesn't really depend upon lower level officials, because the data is centrally maintained. So we were able to, as I said, I was in charge of this organization for last 5 years. And this was not just the first project. We had perhaps, if I am allowed to use the word tamed, I had tamed them. They knew that there is no way getting out of this gentleman. The only way to get out of this person is to give him the data. I was actually called a leech. They knew that the only way to wriggle out of Mr. Chawla is to kind of comply with what he's asking. And the fact that you had a credibility of delivering some of the biggest projects like Bhumi 20 years back, when people did not even know what was the IT system, that credibility was there. So therefore, on one side, they knew that we would deliver. Number two, we were able to impress upon the senior most people to get the data. But that was not the end. The government of India also keeps a lot of data. And believe me, that was more difficult, because while we, after all, who contributes to that data? Only the state government. They don't have their own machinery. But the fact that it goes into your IT system, your means the central government, that does not mean it belongs to them. And therefore, we had to fight with them. We had to perseverance again, 6 months, 8 months, telling them, boss, we want this data. And I think perseverance pays more than the technology part. It was the perseverance, data came. And today we are connected to most of Government of India databases. We are, of course, connected to all the state databases. We now, in the last leg, about 8 months back, we said we will now deliver suo motu services. So we were now, of course, the idea was not to hit at anybody. But if you're getting hit accidentally, then I can't help it. So we now said we will deliver services on a suo motu basis. We know we will create a list for you. Now then, of course, another issue comes. Where is the money? If only 2 million people apply, now you are hunting and finding from your database that 4 million people are available. Where is the finances? So the finance fellow says, look, this is a very nasty system. You are now creating more people for me to fund. They don't realize that the people who are not applying are actually more vulnerable people. They don't even know how to apply. And I think it's our liability to pay them on a suo motu basis. But then, of course, there is always a finances problem. And thanks to our startup with whom we were working, we came up with a concept of a citizen need score. We could calculate the need score. We had, we had our own native graphs, which we formed, which we wrote. Depending upon the scheme, we wrote the graph. And these graphs, we were able to calculate the need score of all the eligible people, and then put it in a higher to lower need score. And then told the government, look, you found 4 million people, you can only pay to 2 million people. Here is the need score. Now, of course, politicians want their discretion, fine. So out of 2 million people whom you want to pay, you pay to 1 million people on a need score. The rest of 1 million people, you decide whom to pay. I think it was a more of a management problem. Of course, it was not a technical problem, but technology always helps. So the need score concept, which is still alien to this country, and I'm sure it's just a matter of time, it will come, and people will then understand that entitlement system necessarily may not increase the size of your budget. You can control the budget by electronically finding out who is more needy, and then give it to only those people.
Thank you very much. Part of those answers follow into another one of my inquiries. One of the doubts I had, which I also was very impressed, was with the, at least what I understood to be a permanent data quality enhancement mechanism. which is one of the crucial things when you are building such a data infrastructure. Because as you have mentioned, you will start impacting other programs as well, and you become part of a network of data and with shared responsibilities that gradually increase the capacity, the abilities, the knowledge of not only government, but all society. So if possible, you could tell me a little bit about that, because I think that's one of the main aspects once the system is in place of how the governance structure will keep on working.
Now, as you connect to various systems and you deliver benefits to various schemes, the data inconsistency automatically comes out. Because when you start creating the scheme, people start challenging it. Now you have a parameter which perhaps was defective. Incidentally, we did not bring the defective value. We only picked it up from the data owning department. But the data owner department had the problem. Sometime you did not have any data owner department, and we came with a confidence score, for example, marital status. Now we called that lady married, but unmarried, for example. But she was actually married and then widowed. She had to get the widow pension. Slowly, because the schemes were getting used, the other schemes were using this data. And as you rightly say, it's a network of schemes. The only thing which would survive is the right data. The defective data automatically distills out of the system, because then people start getting protested. The more you use a database, the more diverse set of schemes use the database. The only result can be that either the database crashes, that means it goes out, or it improves. Because it cannot remain in a status quo, because then there would be lots of objections. And what we are seeing is that this is the 4th year of this project. What we are seeing is that people are excited to use this database, and which of course means that the data is slowly, with the reverse integration, the data quality is slowly improving. People are not objecting. The more they improve, it's a vicious cycle on a positive side. Keep on automatically improve the quality of the data. And then, of course, finally, the self-service options where citizens can look at their data. And one thing which before I close my answer, we did a project called Crop Survey, where we go to 20 million plots every season. We have 3 cropping seasons in the state. 20 million parcels we go and we pick up the crop data. Now, in the beginning, we thought that nobody is looking at this data. So, I mean, there are, of course, digital ways of picking data. You can't pick up wrong data. We have geo-reference plots. Each plot, the owner name is known. The plot coordinates are known. You can't go to a wrong plot and pick up a wrong crop by photograph. Slowly, today, if you come and ask any farmer in Karnataka about the crop data, they know an app where they key in their property number and they will be able to see the photograph. They also know that this data, now this is important, they also know that this data is going to be used for every agriculture related activity. And therefore, they are very conscious of what is getting recorded into the system. And this has happened because we are using the data. So I submit to you that the fact that Annapurna is pushing Kutumba into each project is just a matter of time, that the data quality will be taken care of. Now, I'm not meaning data quality by inconsistency in database. If some data is wrongly recorded by the data owning department, the citizen would now come to know and he would react to it. He'll say, no, this is not my car. You have recorded it wrongly. And therefore, the data quality, not from an inconsistency point of view, not from the format point of view, but from actual quality point of view, will also go up. And I'm happy, I'm sure it's just a matter of 2-3 years that Kutumba would be a good system for GIZ to show everywhere.
Thank you so much. Thanks you, Rodrigo, and thank you, Rahul. Probably will now move on to the audience session, where we've been getting questions pouring in on the chat button, and Madhumita has been helping us out with sorting them and sharing with me. I'll probably share a couple of questions with you both. But one quick question, which is basically more on a lessons learned, which you said we would be sharing with countries. So from your experience of implementing this project, what would be your guidance or lessons learned for countries which are relatively greenfield? They have not had too much digitalization happening in their countries. So what should they do things? What are the things they should do right so that they don't have to go through this complex challenges of data management and data pre-processing? What would you say are the top 3 things they should do? Set up.
Annapurna, can I answer? Okay. So the first point is that I would like to categorize the nations into 2 types. One which has a national ID system, and the two which does not have a national ID system. Those who have national ID, those countries which are lucky, which have this system, they should actually ensure that in each of their systems, whichever IT system they have, and especially those which are critical from this social protection system type of view, they should start seeding. They should not actually care about when this social protection system will come. After all, social protection system is only collection of databases. There is nothing very exciting about it. So we should ensure that the primary databases are all seeded with that national ID. And that, of course, when we talk about seeding, the seeding should be done properly. We should ensure that there is nothing wrong in the seeding. If seeding happens wrong, then we have a big problem in hand. We should also ensure that those attributes which would come into the social protection system, we have checks on that. Checks means the formatting of that, the data quality, the completeness of that data would have to be ensured by the respective schemes, respective database owners or the field owners, the data field, the attribute owner. Will have to ensure, some central agency will have to advise them that while you are doing 50 programs, I am only bothered about these 10 fields. And therefore, in these databases, the national ID has to be seeded properly. And then, of course, those fields which are required like caste, income, education, occupation, disability, marital status, address, I should have the completeness of data. The format should be proper. The data dictionary should be proper. Now, these are important things. Of course, you have many countries which are not having the family data, the national ID. In such cases, you have a big problem in hand. How do you identify families? And therefore, you will have to create. We saw a state which was doing this work where they did not have ID seeded into their databases. Of course, Aadhaar was there, it was not there in the respective databases. If you don't have a family ID, if you don't have a unique ID, you will have to create something temporary. And then, of course, create the database of families without that ID, without any fundamental ID, but just with this artificial ID which you are creating. And then start seeding this ID into each database. Very painful work, but this is the only way we see. We don't really have very rich experience of working without national ID because we were always lucky. Yes, we have seen fuzzy logic, the fuzzy logic systems where you can compare name, father's name, address, and match databases are not very less effective. Of course, if you have a national ID of Aadhaar type, it is very easy. But if it is not the case, even then, I am sure that you can get result using good fuzzy logic mechanisms.
Thank you so much. I think some of the questions that are coming from the audience relate to, how do you measure with respect to, how is the data quality improving with all the pre-processing? Is there a way to measure that? How do you measure the number of objections that are coming from the people? So basically, when we're talking of data analytics and data-driven decision making, is there a way to measure these in the system? And what is the observation as a result?
Anpurna, you will answer. Can you hear Anpurna?
Yes, sir, I can hear. Sir.
Yeah, please.
See, when we measure data quality, we check the 3 parameters critically, mainly completeness, validity, and deduplication, and we assign a score for that data. So whenever data flows into a Kutumba system, we do this data quality assessment and see what is the completeness, validity, and how many duplicates are found, etc. And this is done periodically for Kutumba database also. Internally also, we carry out this data quality assignment. Do we have a mechanism of assigning the percentage of score, whether there is an automated process? The answer currently no, but it is something which we are looking into. But the fact remains that whenever we connect the data post processing, there is a provision enabled for the departments, concerned source departments, to look into their data and see the linking, whether the linking is correct or not. They have been given a provision where they can report if there is any inconsistent linking. So that mechanism has been enabled. So we do a periodic data quality assessment internally. So usually on a quarterly basis, there are various data fields within Kutumba social registry undergoes the DQ checks so that we are consistent. We periodically monitor whether the number of observations or data quality issues, they should gradually go down. So whether we are achieving that aim and whether we are able to connect with the department and get the corrected data, that is followed up. But an automated process is yet to be put in place. We need to remember we are just 3 years old into this, so we are working towards that.
Yeah, but the achievements make us forget that, we think we've done quite a bit and suddenly we are asking for more and more. So there's one other question from the audience, which is, what has been your experience with civil registry interoperability? I remember Mr. Chawla mentioning that was a big achievement, but what were the challenges or what were the factors that facilitated the same?
I remember that we had roughly about 4 million people who had died in last about 10 years. And the idea was, can I pick up this data and clean the social registry? Now, of course, we had no national ID into the registry. We had to deploy a large number of people with, of course, by convincing the chief minister that, look, you will get huge saving into the social pension. And I remember we struggled for about 2 months. This was the only work done by people who are supposed to do this. And we were able to get about 1 million of dead people found out of 4 million people. We were able to link them artificially by seeding the Aadhaar into the death registry, that is the civil registry. I realized that, look, you are so ineffective that you don't even know who are the people who are dying. You know them, they are dying, but you can't connect them to another system. What do? Do you keep on doing this work every time? And then, of course, and then people who were taking birth, the children, the infants which were taking birth. Now, we knew their father and mother, but we did not know where are they in the registry. How do I give them food grain? How do I give them the care which is required, the inoculation, the vaccines, etc. We have things called Anganwadi services, those small places where children can be taken care of. And I remember going to Government of India and saying, I want permission to seed Aadhaar into the civil registry. So people were very touchy about it. The government of India was very touchy about this. They were worried that what would be the impact, the problem of unknown, saying that if I seed Aadhaar into the civil registry, can something go wrong? What happens if something goes wrong? And I'm sorry to say, none of them were very clear as to what will go wrong. They were worried. There are people who are dying. What happens if you put wrong Aadhaar? People are taking birth. What happens if you put wrong Aadhaar? I mean, I don't know. I feel that these were all unfounded. We had to struggle. We had to talk to the Home Secretary, the senior most bureaucrat in Government of India, who is responsible for this registry at the national level. We had to speak to Ministry of IT, who gives the permission for Aadhaar. And then I must tell you, the perseverance paid. We made some presentations, and as a pilot, only and only Karnataka was given permission under 44B2. And today, I feel so delighted that the civil registry, the Kutumba, the social protection system, the social registry is dynamically getting updated from the death and birth system. So to summarize, therefore, before it was seeded with the national ID, it was hell of a time, which continues to be across the country. But after the seeding of Aadhaar, putting processes in place, cajoling them, training the staff as to how do they take care of Aadhaar, and thankfully piggybacking on the success of Aadhaar, you have 99.5% saturation of Aadhaar. Everybody knows about Aadhaar. They know that Aadhaar is important. And therefore, when you mandate Aadhaar, there is no resistance. Everybody has it. And then, of course, once you have Aadhaar, you are connected to your social registry. You know who is dying, who is taking birth, how to cover them into the fair price, and this PDS, public distribution system, Anganwadi services. So that has been very, very fruitful and very rewarding.
Thank you, sir. So I think I'll just take the last question, which clubs two questions from two audience members before handing over to Ines for closing. So the question is, what was the challenge faced by department to connect with Kutumba? And was there any financial support or resource burden for connecting provided to the department?
Anpurna, kindly answer, Anpurna.
So connecting to Kutumba, there were two challenges. One was they did not have the technical knowledge on how to go about it. And secondly, creating awareness of why this integration was required and what would be the benefits of integrating. So both these aspects were required to be covered whenever a department had to integrate with us. So there was a lot of hand-holding, understanding their processes, and we in fact modified our processes to suit their requirement rather than pushing our way into them. So initially we do listen to them, we bring them on board, and then implement our requirements on them so they are comfortable, they accept the changes that are required to be done. Technically, when IT systems are maintained, there has been no major such challenges where they have found it difficult to connect, because the technical know-how is also shared. We write documents, we write manuals, we share it with them. We provide technical support from Kutumba to help them to navigate this process. The second part where you have asked about the financial, currently Kutumba has not extended any financial support to those connecting departments. There has been no such particular request also in those lines which has come from these connecting departments. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, so I think these were audience questions, but I am satisfied, and we have a few more questions which probably we will share offline and address them offline. We just have 4 minutes to.
Anita, if you allow me, I have a small question to you people. Yes. Because of your knowledge. I had 2-3 suggestions which can be given to me later. One was that we have 80% coverage. What would you suggest for increasing this coverage to 100%? Especially these are affluent people. And would you suggest to me some mechanism through which the international experience can? So that's one. Second thing is, how do I keep registry updated? Now, most of my data is automatically updated, but there's something which is not. For example, I don't know whether a person is getting married, right? I am not aware if there is any health problem in the house, or if they have created a new toilet in the house, or something of that sort. How do I encourage citizens to report updation? How should I encourage them without coercing them? Or do I have to coerce? Does coercion work? I am told in some countries this coercion also works. Anita, you know the way we have politics in this country, we'll have limitations, how we can do. And the final question, we today, you know, I'm creating a family database. It's actually a family database. Sometimes you require household data for various reasons. For example, if I have a COVID problem, I will like to look at household instead of family. The family is a legal construct, husband, wife, and unmarried children. But there may be 2-3 families living together in that house. Is there some mechanism? What should I do so that I can dynamically derive the families from the household and household from the families? I don't expect any of these answers right now, but I would be very delighted if I can talk to somebody at a later point of time and can get some input on this.
Sure, thank you. These are very, very interesting questions, and we do have other dialogue series lined up with countries who have advanced and reached good scale in social protection information systems. So I'm hoping we could take up these questions with them and pass on any good advice to you back. Now over to you, Ines, to do your closing remarks and about the next step. Thank you so much. Thanks, Ines. Take over to you.
Thank you very much, Anita. And I wanted to thank our presenters for sharing this super interesting experience and walking us through the main components of the Kutumba system, interoperability capabilities, challenges, as well as other important aspects such as data security and privacy. I wanted also to thank our discussants and all the participants for making this such a rich session. As Ralph was saying at the beginning, this is a dialogue series, so engagement and participation is key from the audience. So we wanted to thank you for that. And then we wanted to let you know, as Ralph said at the beginning, this is the first session in a series of deep dives of different countries' experiences. So we'll have some other country cases in the coming months. Then we'll also have, as you can see in the slide, another event next week on March 24th on open source solutions, and we will have the participation of open source software providers, as you can see. So please join us for this event. And again, we will have other country cases in the coming months on interoperability. And so please follow us on social media to get an update on the upcoming events so that you can continue participating in this series. You can see there some information that Domi is sharing in the chat so that you can stay up to date on our upcoming events. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Ines. And I'm happy to share that Belgium is the country which will be doing the next dialogue series in April last week. And with this, we are just 1 minute overdue, but I would like to thank the presenters, the discussants, and above all, the participants for making this event a big success, and look forward to your participation, continued participation and collaboration on the Digital Convergence Initiative Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.